time on the roof.
Well, we're ordering new bees already. They're going to come from, and bees are going to come from
Done that, it would have been
Wisconsin,
great. You know?
and queen is going to come from Texas. Where this queen came from.
Yeah, that sounds like African.
Yeah. Not have any anyway, when we open this hive up in next spring, I'm going to bring it in and dump it out on the find the queen and see what happened. The queen is, you can see the queen, you can tell the queen is queen, but this one had a red dot and that makes it a little easier.
So I'm glad I got it back. I mean, I got all my contents. I even used it yesterday, even though it's kind of chewed up. I have to find myself another briefcase. This briefcase has been around the world once. Another briefcase postman.
When you saw how many bees were in a month ago, it was just...
I cannot...
That must have been a very
The only thing that makes sense to me is
I've got to get the bees.
took it out of my car, put it on
Try to get the bees
because I thought we were going to go take first.
Well, I don't have lots of books about it.
That's the only thing that makes sense to me. Drove off with it up the right. So,
I kind of thought there would be
because I don't know why there would be no reason for me to put it on my car. But we do move back and forth between cars on Sunday.
I'm sorry. On Thursday.
That's the only thing that makes sense to me. This is not to be critical.
You're blaming anybody.
No.
It's fine.
I don't even
I dropped the tires off.
So here's a little bag of
Maybe I had it out. Maybe I took it out there. But I had it in Bible class.
I was glad I didn't what you said.
Well, I knew what I did. Okay, I picked up the tires. And I had to move everything out of the trunk. Put it on the front seat. So I had that done. Okay, now I think the briefcase was in the front seat.
So, what are they promoting now?
Bible class. I had the briefcase in my Right. And
there's an RV in our driveway.
then,
That's going to go down to Florida. It's
what
going to be the
happened after
escape
that? Well, I still
vehicle
had the tires in the trunk.
for the parents of one of our friends.
Bible class.
Hope it doesn't need to.
just giving you a
It's like our marketing people.
The end of December. It could be we're going to have trouble getting it out of there. Because if you back up toward that tree, try to go forward, I think it's going to be stuck. So I'm thinking I'm going to have him turn the front end as sharp as possible right away, make one pass and get it past the tree. Because unless we clear all the snow out of there, which is going to be
Why?
I think we'll get a ticket from the city.
Maybe that's where they're going.
Been on. So, Esther, someday
So-
we'll have every.
So tell me, water softener.
It's probably in our proposal.
There's only one neighbor that would complain about it. We went over and talked to her and told her why it's there.
I've had it for many years.
That was just making sure.
What's made it? What can go
Well,
wrong?
she's got silver junk cars in her driveway all the time.
Does it get to the point where it doesn't?
It's not obvious that they're junk.
Because we currently have hard water.
Yeah, it's Judy Sloan.
wait,
Is
okay.
the one that would give us
I
trouble.
noticed it was hard water when I took a
I
shower.
used to be in a bridge
So I
company.
found
She was pretty easygoing at that time. But as she got older,
water there, and there was a little bit of buildup.
Demolish a house.
actually about a week older than I am, see, so that's where I'm headed.
What cancer is it? The demolition of our house.
But her husband is a really easygoing guy, charming guy.
This one I brought from my old
All right? When I have this skid loader,
IEEE bag of goodies that has our IEEE logo on everything.
all the sideways in the area,
Thank you very much.
and her,
I always use another coffee mug. That's
Not a hamburger that's supposed to be alive when you're 6 months.
Provided the territories up.
they got
oh, that's
But I
nice.
asked for it to go over my dealer's.
sidewalk.
I
Typically does that.
I haven't. I wish I did right.
Big,
I buy once a year all the fall.
I had the skid loader there. That bucket in the loader is
Maybe in a scientific.
sidewalk's like 64. Down the middle of the sidewalk, I picked up that sod,
Dr. Garber that I was showing him.
on top of the concrete, sit it on top
Yeah.
of the smoke.
Remember we
Not
had to
shooting out
catch
for
that
doing
in the
Just about all of them. I think I'm amazed.
I continue doing the other neighbors'
Logo.
sidewalks, but just not hers anymore. And of course, next spring she figured out that it was the sidewalk. That's where the sod came
Yeah.
from. She was quick to complain about it.
He was old.
Her husband comes over and tries to pay me for it. That's the difference between the two of them.
Let me check.
But she doesn't drive.
They're always donating.
How old is he?
I think he's
Oh,
about
yeah.
Got 5 or 7, 9.
In fact, Jim put together
All right, sounds good.
something in honor of
All right.
my son.
He gonna go?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And then we'll get started.
They're named
Yep.
I
Foundation.
sent out pictures of me that I've taken with my.
Want to give me, because
We were together out in.
north of
No, this
37.
was.
Want a pen?
You mentioned that before.
Yeah.
This
He had
was
Well, you
four
might
AS
not be able to
400s
come
in
and
his
help
house
me
at
either.
one time.
and I got a picture.
She's gonna rewrite her.
Well, I'm gonna call them up and find out what
You
can
know,
we, what can
all
you
the
do
programs
to
that
the
IBM
water software?
work on all levels of the AS 400. Isn't that right?
Takes photographs.
Well, that's true.
I know.
That's what they're working on. You have to
I
prove it.
just
So
grabbed
you have
something from a
models,
previous conference.
Okay.
phone two of them.
Yeah, I think that'll be fine. And if I say Michigan Tech, you're okay?
Oh yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Just doing this.
Well, I don't know if mine is saturated. Thing is,
Tried to give one of them to the History Center.
Oh,
And,
All right, I think we'll get started. I actually meant to start this a little sooner, so I apologize. Just a couple highlights before we begin from the section's business point of view. I would like to point out that this Thursday we have our Warren Miller movie. I don't know if any of you have attended that in the past, but it's always a blast. We reach out to the local grade or high schools and try to get them to attend as well. Normally a fantastic turnout. And of course, I don't know what you know about Warren Miller, but he's kind of an extreme snow sports type of a guy. He's been doing that for a long time, and actually we've got a kind of a blessing that Dr. Holmes can find the contact there and bring that movie here. It's actually it's more of a treat than maybe you realize that they actually there are places up in the Twin Cities, for instance, that will display this or show the movie, and it's a full-length movie, so it's a full charge and everything. Due to the fact that we're showing it to the high school kids and bringing it into the IEEE, which is nonprofit, they do give it to us at a relatively minimal charge. Any charge? There's minimal charge. So we do coordinate that with the Mayo BMES student group as well. Again, if you haven't been to it in the past, we also bring in a speaker to start the night off, and so that's why we start a little bit earlier at 6 so that we can kind of get the kids home before it's too late. So highly recommended if you're available on Thursday, this coming Thursday, and you can catch that. And again, it's actually a pretty special speaker coming in as well from the Office of Naval Research, and he'll give us his take on performance enhancement. All right, so that was one thing. A meeting that didn't make it into my slides, and I apologize for that. We actually have the machine learning thing that we did last month. We're going to try to take that and we're going to attack it from the hardware side of things, right, Chuck? Is that the direction we're going? So there'll be a special presentation from actually a speaker out in Burlington, I think. Is that where he still is? And we're going to try to do a remote session with that one. So he'll be up on the screen talking to us and have his slides available to us, but we'll still meet here and send our questions back to him from his office. So it'll come from Burlington, Vermont, and should also be a real interesting presentation. When? Sorry, that's the third Monday in January. January 21st, and then we'll be the normal time for that one, 6:30 to 8. And then the last thing that I of course have to push is if you have not yet renewed your membership, which I myself am also guilty of. Please do so. We appreciate your membership. Your membership is what enables us to do what we do. So thank you very much. That is all I have for the housekeeping angle. And so now I'll turn it over to Paul Dollinger, a volunteer here, that's maybe another thing I should mention is that Paul did this on his own and came up to us with this idea and these speakers, and we gladly appreciate his efforts. So more than willing to extend that invitation to anybody else out there. If you've got an idea for a speaker and would like to host them and bring them in, we will gladly take you up on that. Paul?
Great, thank you all for attending tonight. Tonight we have a very interesting topic, self-driving buses in a Minnesota environment. I'm just going to read you a little abstract and some bioinformation here. The Minnesota Department of Transportation, with support from WSB, which is an infrastructure engineering firm up in the Twin Cities, and AECOM, which is a consulting firm as well, recently pursued an autonomous bus pilot project to research vehicle and infrastructure requirements for an automated vehicle bus that can safely operate in cold weather climate conditions in the state of Minnesota. Phase 1 included a technology assessment, feasibility study, pilot site selection, and solicitation of an automated vehicle industry partner. Phase 2 involved working with the selected technology partner in finalizing the design, deployment plan, and performing self-driving vehicle testing in a variety of weather conditions as well. A unique aspect of Minnesota is cold and snowy winter weather conditions, which currently create several challenges for automated vehicle operations. The team also recognized that a likely area of initial rollout could be a private third-party, fully automated bus transit shuttle service. The purpose of the pilot was to better prepare for the operations of an automated bus in mixed general traffic in Minnesota's cold weather climate. We have two speakers here tonight from the Twin Cities. The first is Keon Sabetti. Ms. Sabetti is the Transportation Program Manager for WSB, major company up in the Twin Cities, and also has a presence here in Rochester. Keon received her BS in Civil Engineering from the University of Minnesota and has over 25 years of experience in delivering transportation projects from concept development through primary and final design. Keon was instrumental in bringing the first autonomous vehicle to Minnesota for winter weather testing. Keon served as a consultant contract manager on the Minnesota Autonomous Bus Pilot Project. Her vision, tenacity, and leadership provided guidance and support to MnDOT leadership during project execution, stakeholder coordination, and public outreach. Keon continues to monitor new market trends and develop strategic and tactical views for WSB. Our second speaker tonight is Mr. Daryl Tavala. He's a member of AECOM, which is a company in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis office. Daryl is the Director of Intelligent Transportation Systems and Traffic Engineering. He has more than 33 years experience, including work in 16 different U.S. states in the areas of intelligent transportation systems, connected and automated vehicles, traffic management centers, advanced transportation management systems, and other emerging technologies. Daryl served as a consultant project manager on the Minnesota Autonomous Bus Project, including the testing of a driverless shuttle bus in winter weather conditions. Daryl received his BS in Civil Engineering from Michigan Tech. He is a registered professional civil engineer and traffic engineer and is certified as a professional transportation operations engineer. Please join me in welcoming Keon Sabetti and Daryl Tavala.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. First and foremost, I wanted to thank IEEE for inviting Daryl and I to talk about, really, in my career, this is probably one of the most exciting projects I've been involved in. I just wanted to give you a very brief background about how this project came about. I joined WSB in September of 2015, and prior working at WSB, which is a local regional firm of 450 people in Twin Cities, and we have offices now all over the place, and we have an office in Rochester too. I always worked on these big national giant firms, like my friend Daryl is working on AECOM. So when I joined our president, the very first month, he was always putting some articles in front of me to learn about autonomous vehicles. Do you know about this? And I had no idea what he's even talking about. So that kind of got me excited to learn about autonomous vehicles, connected vehicles in the spring and summer of 2016. And I started doing a lot of research, looking at LinkedIn, looking at every article that was coming about to see who are the people that are using these buses. And everything I read, everything that was going on was either in Europe that was these kinds of buses were moving, or in warm climates, like Tampa was issuing an RFP, I think Atlanta was issuing an RFP. So in my mind, I knew I want to bring this in Minnesota. So when you're working in a smaller company versus a giant company, I used to work with AECOM many years ago. So I contacted Dick Wolfsfeld, who's a senior executive at AECOM, and I told him, Dick, I've got this idea, let's bring it to Minnesota. And he laughed and he goes, oh, it's one of your ideas, let's see what we could do. So then I found the conference in Tampa, Florida, in fall of 2016. It was called Florida Automated Vehicle Summit. So I went to that conference, and it was for the first time that I saw this bus. And so they brought the bus for the demonstration, hopped on the bus. The excitement of, this is the future of transportation. Got back together with Dick, we approached MnDOT executive leadership, and if really wasn't for Charlie Zelli, the Commissioner of Transportation, and Stu Mulvihill as the Chief Engineer, Deputy Commissioner of MnDOT, we could never bring this project in. So they got totally excited. We went to them and we said, here's our idea. We will help you write a proposal, RFP. We will help you with selecting a vendor. They selected the vendor. We didn't have anything to do with it. And I also requested from Dick that I want Daryl to be the project manager for this. So really, this is how this project came about. MnDOT got really excited. And I can't believe it that we had the bus coming to Rochester. We had the bus during Super Bowl on Nicollet Avenue. We had it at University of Minnesota. And the excitement about this for me is to have as many people to understand what this technology is, because I think within the next 10, 15 years, these things will be cruising in our streets and hopefully on our highways. So I will have, Daryl is really the day-to-day person on this project, so he's gonna walk you through some slides. Thank you very much.
All right, can you hear me? Yes. Through the mic, okay? Great. Thanks, Keon. Thanks, Paul, and thanks to IEEE. We appreciate the opportunity to be here to share a little bit about what happened in Minnesota with an automated self-driving bus last winter. So I got a lot of slides I can cut off at any point. I would say if you've got a burning question as I'm going through the information, please, jump in and we can kind of hit it right then, or if you want to wait till the end, we can do that too. So we're pretty flexible here tonight. So this is kind of our presentation. I'm going to spend most of the time on the actual testing that was done, but we'll touch a little bit more on the overview. This is kind of a photo of the leadership. The only person who's not in here is Dick Welsfeld, who Keon had mentioned from AECOM. Up on the right-hand side is Jay Heppes from MnDOT. He was the project director of this effort. The very left is Mike Kronzer. He was a project manager dealing with the day-to-day activities with our consulting team. You can see Keon and myself in the middle, and then Janelle Borgen, also with WSB, is shown as part of our project team. So we're really living in some pretty exciting times. There's such advancements happening with automation and communications. It's really pushing this automated vehicle technology, and it's coming really fast. It's exciting, but it's a great opportunity for Minnesota really to start doing some things, to start preparing. Try to answer some of the questions. What is it going to do to our traffic operations and our systems that we are out there trying to manage? What types of changes to our transportation planning and design and implementations do we need to start thinking about to get ready for this technology? What kind of laws and regulations need to be put in place to allow operation of these out there on the public roads? Kian mentioned the public acceptance and the importance of getting the technology out there and showcasing it. Probably the number one thing is safety. So last year in the U.S., the year 2017, there were 40,000 traffic fatalities out there. Minnesota had 358. It's come down quite a bit. This chart, I know you can't read it, but it kind of showed the trajectory of what was happening in Minnesota with traffic fatalities on our highways. We were getting up near 700 fatalities a year. So that orange to the blue line is kind of when they started the Towards Zero Death program. And that kind of took the low-hanging fruit, made some nice improvements out there. And you can see the fatality trend really came down. But then you got into more recent years and it started climbing up again. So this is a great opportunity to use this technology to eliminate the traffic fatalities on our highways. 90% are due to human error. So automated vehicles take all the human element away from it. So we could actually reduce traffic fatalities by 90% at some point. So that's a great thing to think about. Keon mentioned that the challenges in the winter environment that we live in. Last week, Waymo announced these robo-taxis, kind of a rideshare service. Guess where they're implementing it? In Arizona. And the reason is because it's almost sunny there every day. They don't get rain, they don't get snow. So this is a challenge. It's a challenge for the industry. How does this technology really work in a snow and a real cold winter environment? So that was one of the things MnDOT wanted to look at, was how does it operate on our roadways during the midwinter, as well as the silt conditions. You see what it does to our cars with all the grime that gets caked on it. What does that do to the sensors? Those are some of the things they want to look at. I won't go over these, but these are kind of 6 goals that were set up at the beginning of the project. We kind of already talked about the weather, the operations piece of it. Paul talked a little bit in the introduction about these third-party services showing up out there on the roadways, like these autonomous shuttles or buses, or maybe it's from the trucking industry. So it's a great opportunity for MnDOT to start getting prepared for that. The mobility, it's really mobility for all, people that are disabled and the aging community too. So it's really looking at what can we do to improve their life. And then related to operations on Minnesota roads, what kind of infrastructure improvements maybe we need to start thinking about? And maybe it's things we need to do to help with that winter operations. I think as far as the influence, MnDOT didn't want this only happening in the warm weather climate states. They wanted it happening here in Minnesota, and they wanted to be part of that national discussion. So, we need to think about operating these vehicles 365 days a year in all conditions. 70% of the U.S. roads get, on average, 5 inches of snowfall per year. So that's throughout our nation, 70%. So this is an area that needs to be addressed. And then a big thing with MnDOT too is keep working on establishing those partnerships to push the technology. Just for the timeline, we got started in early 2017. Our first step was really to look at what was happening with the technology. Was it real? Was it a project MnDOT should really go forward with? They felt comfortable that there was enough demonstrations and other pilots that happened in other parts of the world to move forward. So then we worked with them in developing the requirements, putting together the vendor RFP, and then put that out on the street. Prior to doing that, we did do some industry outreach to help finalize that RFP and the requirements, and then the selection happened in the fall of 2017. This is just kind of a sampling of the interest that MnDOT had as we went out and talking to the vendors about the opportunity. Is really a mix of those companies that were doing autonomous bus demonstrations already. We had software companies, retrofit companies, we had bus companies. Yutong is actually a company from China that had interest in possibly doing something here. And then we had a lot of public agencies and other potential partners that just wanted to see what was this all about. How could we potentially participate? So MnDOT put the RFP out. We were hoping to get a proposal for a large 40-foot bus. That did not happen because the technology just wasn't ready yet. So we got two proposals, one from Local Motors and one from Easy Mile. They were very similar, the smaller shuttles, 12 passenger capacity. Local Motors actually is teamed with IBM, and they're doing that IBM Watson, some of that artificial intelligence as part of their package, which was really interesting. I think MnDOT felt a little more comfortable with Easy Mile and the experience they had in other parts of the world in conducting pilots. So Easy Mile was chosen as the partner. They actually brought First Transit in as the operators of the vehicles. First Transit does a lot of bus operations here in different parts of the state. So you can see the different partners. 3M actually provided the wrap that was placed around the shuttle that came here to Minnesota. It was manufactured in France, was shipped here. Basically, it looked like a white box, and then 3M put a really cool looking wrap on it. So Paul talked a little bit about the phases in our introduction, but once we had the vendor on board, we really focused on the testing, and I'll talk a little bit about our site and what we did. And then we finished that up, and then we really focused on doing the demonstrations as part of the Super Bowl, and then other demonstrations that followed that. So a little bit more details about the shuttle itself. It was called the EZ10. It was actually here in Rochester in the spring of last year. Actually, the spring of this year.
18, yes.
18. It was spring of this year, yeah. It's like, can't keep track of time. I know Paul indicated tonight that he was actually on the shuttle. Anybody else here have the experience? Okay, we got at least one other person. So you kind of got a feel for what it's like. It's very low speed. So the design speed is 25 miles per hour, but it probably, we got up to about 11 miles per hour when we did the testing, and it was probably even lower than that when they were doing the demonstrations in various locations. The detection relied on LiDAR. I'll talk a little bit more about that in more details in a minute. It does need to be pre-programmed on the specific route it's going to operate ahead of time. It just can't go anywhere. So there's a little bit of work involved for that. GPS is very accurate, so it uses a combination of the GPS and the LiDAR detector for the localization and just to make sure its path is safe and it's not going to be hitting anyone. The levels of automation. So you might be familiar with these as an IEEE group, but this is Society of Automotive Engineers. So they have this level 0, which would be no automation at all. Manually, you do everything. All the way over to 5, which is full automation, and that vehicle can do everything and can go anywhere. So the Easy Mile shuttle had no steering wheel, no brakes, no pedals. So it basically was level 4 autonomy, but it did have to be pre-programmed on the exact path it was going to travel on. Level 1 could be kind of like that adaptive cruise control that's been around a while. Level 2 is kind of like the Tesla that you've heard a lot about with the driver assist systems. And Tesla's kind of getting into level 3, and Audi claims they can do level 3 where it's a little bit more advanced, and the driver still needs to be there in the seat and kind of monitor the situation, but the higher the number, the more intelligent it gets. This is kind of just a easy way of looking at it. So the level 4, hands, feet, eyes, brain off, but it is in constrained environments. To get to level 5, it's completely unconstrained. When we'll get to level 5, we don't know. We're not there yet, but it could be 5 years, it could be 10 years, it could be 20 years. Nobody really knows, but the technology is advancing really fast. So for our testing site, it was basically the Mineral facility MnDOT's located up on I-94, about 35 miles northwest of the Twin Cities. This facility was established in the early 1990s as a pavement research facility. MnDOT has used it for doing some intelligent vehicle testing, which focused a lot on snowplows in the 1990s already. And they've kind of opened it up to, as a proving ground site that vendors can come in and kind of test some technology. This is a little better view of the facility. So you've got a 2.5 mile low volume loop that is in this area. You can maybe get 50 miles per hour in the straight stretches here. The curves are probably about 30 miles an hour. Right here is a high-speed segment. It's about 3 miles long. Actually splits off of I-94, eastbound and westbound, that are located here. So you can see right now they are actually operating this bypass. And again, they do this for pavement research for the most part. But this, it's completely controlled. It was a great environment for us to get into and safely do our testing that we moved forward with. So this is kind of another view of it. So you can see this 2.5 mile low volume loop here. And then this is the high speed segment that goes through here. We actually focused, because of the speed of the shuttle, we just focused on a piece of the low volume loop. And actually this shows it a little bit better. This is the actual facility here at MnDOT, they're building. And then we programmed in kind of a start-stop here. We had a simulated intersection stop here. It would make a left turn. We simulated it stopping like for a transit stop right in this area where it could maybe drop off passengers, pick up passengers, and then it continued on. So that was our loop, and we drove that around and around, and we did all of our various testing along there. We did start off with an evaluation plan, so we looked at, what are the testing scenarios we wanted to do, kind of laid out a schedule of activities, and we figured out, well, what are our roles of the consultant team, what are the roles of MnDOT, who was doing what. So we laid out all the details in that evaluation plan. This kind of high level shows what we tried to do. So we wanted to start kind of in the fair weather conditions just to make sure everything was working appropriately, do some testing before we got into the winter weather conditions. We wanted to look at snow, ice, and salt. These are the conditions. And we wanted to introduce kind of these real life variables into the testing to see how would the automated shuttle bus actually react. The thing we did was, we really couldn't control the weather that much, right? We kind of had to deal with what was dealt with us, but we did set up controlled weather testing, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But that was kind of a first time for MnDOT ever doing what they did here, actually renting some equipment to create snow instead of trying to get rid of snow. So this is just kind of a big listing of observations and the conditions that we experienced. A couple things we thought we would look at. One's, it's not on here, even crossed out, was related to emergency sirens. The Easy Mile shuttle did not have the capability to listen for that at all, so we kind of struck that off the list. We knew we couldn't test that. Another piece we wanted to look at was traffic signals. We were actually making provisions to bring a portable traffic signal out at the MnDOT facility, and that's another piece Easy Mile wasn't ready for yet. They just did not do that interface. Now they have it ready, and they're actually doing some testing in California, but when we were doing this project, it wasn't available. But really, everything else on this list that you see here, we experienced as part of the demonstration. So this is our test team. So we had 12 pretty intense days in December and then January where we actually did the winter weather testing. So I actually usually don't get to do this, but I got to go out in the field, and it was fun. And thank you, Keon, for getting me involved with the project. So it was great to actually be out there and running through the tests and conducting them. Mike Kronzer, again, MnDOT's PM. This is Ben Sandoz, who was assistant to Mike, and then Janelle Borgen with WSB. So we spent a lot of hours together out there in the shuttle. But we also always had a first transit operator with us because by law we had to, and I think for safety we wanted one of them. So there was always at least one first transit staff with us out there with the testing as well as all the demonstrations for the public that were conducted. So this is, I'll get more into the bus and kind of the detection. So the design speed again is 25. Our top speed for testing was 11. We had the ability to test at variable speeds, which was good, because as we started off with introducing some new things, we wanted to start like at that 2 mile per hour, see how it reacted, and then we could increase the speed. So that worked out really nice for us. I think a combination of the testing and the tours, we ended up putting over 200 miles in a pretty short period of time on the bus. So we did get to test it out. This here basically shows the locations of where the LiDAR sensors, so LiDAR is basically it's a light detection and ranging. It's similar to radar, but it uses light, and it looks at the reflection of light for the measurement and for the detecting capability. The GPS that they used was up on top of the roof. And then they had a LiDAR sensor in the front and the back. They also had LiDAR sensors right below the windshield in the front and the back. And then on each corner of the vehicle, they had LiDAR sensors. And there were cameras installed just above the windshield in the front and the back, but they were not operating yet. But Easy Mile had them there with an intent to eventually use them. This is kind of shows you a little bit more details about the detector. So up on the roof, you got it's a four-layer LiDAR that shoots out about 220 meters. And that's looking at kind of monuments and kind of the landscaping that's out there and helping with the localization and where it should be on its path. They're actually showing what the camera images will pick up, but we did not use any of that for our testing. Those front-rear LiDARs were 16 layer, basically shot like a cone out, and that's looking for obstacles in front of it. So it's going to slow down or it's going to stop if it detects an obstacle. And then those ones on each corner is a 1 layer LiDAR shooting out about 40 meters. And again, it's looking for obstacles or obstructions that might be near the vehicle. So with these, and they have a 270 degree radius, you have 360 degree coverage around the entire vehicle. So it's very safe. And then with the speed, I mean, it was very safe conditions for us, and none of us ever felt unsafe with everything we did.
What is a layer?
I guess a good example would be, you can see this down here, it's a single layer, so it's basically shooting out at a very small beam. So this here is kind of 16 layers. So if you can imagine, there's actually 16 different layers that are being shot out here. So that's probably the easiest way I can explain it. And I'm not a technical expert on the LiDAR detection itself. But this was basically just looking for anything that might be approaching the vehicle on the side. You can see you got the coverage on the side up here. So it's really just looking low down, and anything breaks it or is detected, it's going to stop. So a lot of people ask what kind of infrastructure we had to put out there on Min Road, and really the only thing we needed to do was we put these steel posts every few hundred feet, and every once in a while we put one of these blank panels. And the reason for that was, this picture shows it a little bit better, it was so wide open out there. We didn't have to put anything in downtown Minneapolis because of the buildings. So that LiDAR could pick up the buildings kind of as the monuments. There was nothing to pick up out here, so we did install some of those posts. There's one over here you probably can't see. The only other thing we did was we put these cones around the pond that was located right here just for safety. And then we had this sign specially made at the entrance of Min Road, just giving visitors a heads up that we were doing some autonomous vehicle testing. So this is kind of a list of the 12 different days we were out there. So, from early December to mid-January. we were fortunate. We hit everything. We hit about a 40-degree day, and we hit a minus 24-degree day. We had every type of pavement condition we would want, every type of weather variable. So it was great from a testing standpoint into the Minnesota environment and what we could typically experience. The other thing we wanted to do was do the testing at different times of the day. So this is kind of like a sunlight graph. So in the center here is when we had the bright sunlight. We did some early morning testing as the sun was just starting to come up. We did night testing during the dark to see how things perform. So that was a big piece of what we wanted to do. And then this is kind of a graph of just showing the different weather conditions we had. The majority of the days out there were actually clear. It doesn't mean we didn't have snow on the pavement, or the pavement wasn't icy, but it was clear. And that's kind of typical, right? We have some snow come through, and then we get sunny days for a few days here in Minnesota. It could be very bitter cold, but so we had light snow, heavy snow. This day here, it was actually a mild day. It was kind of foggy, and then we had a light misty rain that was actually starting to turn into snow. So we were able to test in some of that environment as well. So for our data collection, we don't have a lot of detailed data like the vendor would collect on their algorithm and how the vehicle performed, and kind of trying to make some conclusions. And MnDOT made the determination up front. They didn't want that because we wanted to be sensitive to the vendor, because we wanted to have them come in here and learn lessons as well. Because we knew the technology wasn't perfect, and we wanted everybody to learn some lessons. So what we did was we observed. We did do some data collection. We actually created a Google app. WSB created it, and we were able to input things for every lap that we did around that loop. What was the weather? What was the temperature, wind conditions, and so on? You can kind of see all of the variables here. We took the battery charge data down because we wanted to see, based on the weather conditions, how's the battery being drawn down. Was the heater on or off? And then, where we had stops and emergency slowdowns, we did capture all of that. We had the ability to make notes on some sheets we had. We took photos. We could upload it to the Google Docs. So we had a lot of data that we did collect, even though we didn't get into the technical details of what the vendor had available to them. These are just some images to show you what the conditions were like out there for our uncontrolled testing, from bare pavement to the compacted snow, icy spots. And this is actually it's kind of a bad photo, but that was that night we had that light misty rain starting to turn to snow. And these more uncontrolled testing, little harsher conditions, anywhere from just loose, blowing, drifting snow to 1 inch to days where it was really miserable out there, very cold. This kind of gives you a little sample of one of those colder days. You can hear the wind, cold, snow was falling, and there's our shuttle. So that was, one of the more harsher days that we were out there.
Do they have,
Go ahead.
Do you have active devices to clean the front of the sensors, or do you have just hydrophobic coating?
Yeah, so the sensors had to manually be wiped down. Yeah, and usually when we started the day, the first transit operators would kind of wipe everything down and clean it up. We did tell them on some days, we said, leave it dirty. We just want to see what happens. So, but yeah.
But they don't have active, like wipers?
They have wipers on the windshield, but nothing to clean the sensors themselves.
Thank you.
So these are some images of the controlled testing we did. So part of the controlled testing was we made ice ourselves, and we started off with just making ice in the wheel path. So we started small, and then we started making it bigger. We went across the lanes. We went at the intersection stop location. We went on one of the straight stretches, and we wanted to see, how did the vehicle actually perform. And then we had MnDOT go out, do some plowing, put road salt down. We wanted to get it as sloppy as we could to see if we could get some of that grime on the LiDAR sensors to see if that impacted anything. And then this is actually a snowmaking machine that we had out there for 2 days. We utilized this. WSB made arrangements with a ski hill that actually makes snow using this equipment on their hills, and they brought it over to the MnRoad facility. And we had 2 of these set up. We had one warmer day where we kind of got slush, and then we had a really cold day. And I got a video clip I can show you that cold day and on how that looked. So findings, so bare pavement, clear weather, it performed great. Again, we tried the variable speeds. We did all the different types of interactions in those test scenarios. It performed great. We did have some slowdowns and emergency stops, and we think it was because it was picking up leaves or weeds or something that were blowing across the path. So we did experience some of that. Someone has a question?
Yeah, relative to the obstructions, if the vehicle's programmed for a pre-programmed path only, and there's something unexpected like maybe road construction or another vehicle accident or something blocking the way, how is that handled?
Yeah, so what it'll do, it won't know what it is. It'll just know that there's an obstruction. And if it detects it as an obstruction, it's going to slow down. If it gets too close and that obstruction is still there, it's going to stop. We did at times, especially during the heavy snow and blowing snow conditions, we had some pretty severe stops where they're pretty sudden. And, that's why we always kind of don't want to be sitting or holding something. We could kind of be jarred a little bit. It wasn't enough to hurt any of us, but some of the stops could be sudden. There's one more question.
So if the vehicle stays there in front of it, will it just sit there for an hour?
Well, at that point, you would probably have to have that first transit operator take manual control of it. So they, in the vehicle, they had it. It's kind of like these joysticks that were hung around their necks, and they had controls basically. So if they had to, they could take over control of the vehicle. In that circumstance, they would probably either go around it or pull it off to the side and just stay. So they would have to take over manual control. Yes?
So it can detect obstructions, but what about potholes or things below the
Potholes, no, not this Easy Mile, but I know some of the autonomous vehicle technology vendors are saying they can detect or see that a pothole is coming, but the intelligence isn't there for them to avoid it yet, is what I heard from GM last week when they visited Minnesota. So, but they are doing a lot in that area with potholes, and they can at least collect the data where they're at, right? And maybe if you get that AI kind of built in, you can start learning a little bit, right? So the next time that vehicle approaches that pothole, it knows, oh yeah, there's a pothole there. Maybe it does, navigate around it then. But we're not quite there yet for that. So with the 1 inch snow, so these are our findings. We had a very calm day. We had the snow on the pavement. There wasn't any wind. It was fairly mild. And it actually performed very similar to when we had bare pavement. So during this day, we did some testing with the work zone barrel as well, and it interacted fine. We had no issues at all. This gave us a great opportunity, where we had the snow-covered road to look at the wheel wander. And I got some images here I can show you. This is basically, there were other vehicles out here. We were driving around, but, this was the primary route right here. And it becomes very observant, the accuracy. And we can get down to 3 millimeter accuracy of this wheel path. Here's an image of this crossover that was actually gravel to get to the other side of the loop. And you can kind of see the wheel rutting that was starting to occur because we were following that same path every time. So, that's something to think about. And MnDOT does have interest and looking at this further, and Keon and I are working on a new project for an automated truck. So MnDOT wants to look at bringing an automated truck up to Min Road and actually doing some pavement testing related to the accuracy of that wheel path. You know, what is that going to do to pavements, and how should we be designing them in the future? Yes?
Can you go back to the slide with wheel wander? Is that an error? In other words, you wanted a straight path, but it turned out to not be a straight path?
Now, this actually, over here off the screen, we had a program stop. So it was actually on the shoulder area. So this was part of the program path. We were actually moving off the shoulder out into the lane of Min Road.
So this
was the program path.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, good question. Yes. Yeah, yep. They basically went out there and did the 3D mapping and using their LiDAR detection and the GPS, and they manually had to drive it, and then they could use their software to set the path. And we drove the same path every time unless there was a little bit too much slippage because of maybe icy roads. And if we had too much slippage, the vehicle would come to a stop. If it was minor slippage, it had the ability to correct itself and get itself back on the path. And we experienced that several times. It actually worked really slick. But if it was too much, it would stop because it would get confused. The tires have the odometry, so they're kind of, you know, if the tires slip too much, they kind of lose track then of, well, where am I on my path? So it stops, and then you got to reset it, and then you continue on. Yes?
Is this rig all-wheel drive?
It is all-wheel drive, yeah. And that's one of the reasons why it actually performed pretty well in snow and ice conditions. Yeah. And it leads right to the next slide. So great question. Yeah, so I think because of the way they had the sensors and their algorithm and the way they developed the control system, I think if they had slippage on a tire, they were able to make adjustments on the other tires and then get it back into control. So it worked really well. We were surprised how well it performed in the ice conditions.
Was it affected by crosswinds?
No, we did not experience any issues with crosswinds at all. And that's actually one of the things the ski hill company was thinking about actually testing, and they came to the conclusion, well, it didn't make sense to even try to look at that. And then we had some pretty windy days out there, and we didn't notice that impacting, except for blowing the snow, and that did create some issues for us. One of the things we found, this is actually the housing for one of the LiDAR sensors that's right here. These were manufactured in France. They weren't thinking about snow. So actually, as we had loose snow on the pavement, it was getting kicked up by the tires, and it was going into this housing. And as we started moving, this snow was jumping around, and we were actually picking it up as an obstruction. So that was kind of a lesson learned for the vendor. And as a quick solution, the guys from First Transit were just using some duct tape out there to cover up some of the holes for the housing, and that actually seemed to reduce it. Didn't eliminate it, but it reduced it quite a bit. But that's one of the improvements that Easy Mile took down as for all weather conditions. You know, they need to do something with weatherproofing that housing a little bit more. So then these are findings with the compacted, loose, and blowing snow. So with compacted snow, we had some issues, but it seemed like it was mostly when we were operating at that higher speed, or if we were doing some tests with variable speed. So, you know, we had a vehicle in front of it, the shuttle would have to slow down and it would speed up again. That's when we seemed to get some slippage and then that localization issue. So that's when we might come to a stop because it slipped a little bit too much. The loose and blowing snow really became obstructions. You know, the LiDAR detection did not know what it was. So it's for safety and precaution, it's going to slow down or it's going to stop. So if we had the loose snow out there on a windy day like this, we were stopping a lot. It did not do well, just with the LiDAR detection. We did have some days where we said, MnDOT, go plow the loose snow off. Let's see what happens. That did reduce the amount of emergency stops we had, but it seemed like the slippage kind of increased a little bit because I think, they just plowed it. They didn't put down chemicals or anything, and it seemed to make the condition a little bit more icy. And then, of course, with the colder temperatures and compacted snow, we just saw some more slippage. Overall, it wasn't that big of a deal, the slippage, but we did experience it, and we knew what conditions would kind of bring on more of it. This is after we were doing some road salt observations, and we took a picture of one of the LiDAR sensors. We actually had one of those days where the salt was placed. It was kind of patchy, ice and snow here and there, but we had big segments that were bare, so we weren't able to get it as sloppy as we wanted to get it. We could have got this thing even a lot more dirty, but at this state, it actually didn't seem to impact the performance at all. But that's one of the things we would have liked to have gone back out and really, got this thing a lot dirtier and see what happens. But with this, it actually performed well. Yes?
Was it the drifting snow or the accumulation of snow that caused the problem?
Drifting.
The biggest problems were with heavy falling snow,
Drifting, yeah.
and then the blowing snow. The accumulation wasn't that big of a deal unless it got kicked up by the tires, and then was.
I meant accumulation on the sensors.
Oh, this here? This was basically from the road salt that got put down. So that was the chemical, and to get this, we had a vehicle traveling in front of the shuttle to try to create that spray that we experience on the highways. But that's what resulted. That's about as dirty as we could get it.
It's a related question then. If the problem is looking through the snow, would dense fog be the same problem?
Dense fog could be a problem, yep. Okay. Yeah, definitely. And even a real heavy rain could create a similar problem. Rain is not as bad as snow, and I've heard because it doesn't reflect as much as snow does because of the ice crystals, but a heavy rain could still create some issues. So this is our snowmaking machine, and I can actually show you how it worked. We had two of these. We got about coverage of 500 feet, anywhere from a trace of 56 inches deep. This actually was on one of the warmer days. You can see the rainbow. That moisture content was pretty high that day. And that was one of the days where we actually ended up creating about 4 inches of slush. And that's kind of an image of what the slush looked like. And this was kind of on the colder day where we were able to make some good snow. We were purposely driving through here trying to create different ruts and paths just to see how the bus would perform going through. And it wasn't perfect, but I would say it actually performed pretty well going through the snow and the slush. Unless, like I say, it was kicking up enough slush or snow to become an obstruction to the LiDAR detectors, then it would stop. And the all-wheel, four-wheel drive definitely helped, with the performance here. So this was, I think, our last day of testing, actually. We had the snowmaking machine out there. It was very, very cold. That was that day we got down to about minus 24 wind chill. And I can show you right now, this is just a snow cloud that I created from the snowmaking machine. And this is us. I'm actually in the transit vehicle now, and we're driving through the snow cloud. We just wanted to see what would happen. We're really slowing down. So there's an emergency stop. And you heard the bell. That's all we would hear if we got an emergency stop. So basically, we knew that was going to happen, but we just wanted to see how far could we get into it. But it just creeped along until it finally just came to a complete stop. So if you're in that heavy blowing snow, whiteout conditions, that vehicle was not going to go anywhere.
Because the laser beam is not going to go, doesn't propagate much once you have cloudiness, it's
Right,
gone.
right.
It doesn't,
Yeah.
nothing can penetrate that.
So it doesn't pull off the road or anything, it just stops in the middle of the traffic?
Yeah, so this is a continuation, so we're stuck right here, okay? So you can see the snowmaking machine there. And we wanted to see, are we gonna start moving at some point? You know, what's gonna happen? And we didn't move. So what we did, I wish we would have captured this on film. We told the snowmaking gentleman to shut it off. We let everything settle, and eventually the bus recovered and it continued on its path. I wish we would have captured that, but we didn't. So, but that would have told kind of the whole story there.
Do it for the truck.
We'll do it for the truck, yeah. But it was an interesting day. We had a lot of stops with the snowmaking machine, but it basically was a confirmation of what we thought was going to happen.
In the picture, you don't have any lighting on that vehicle that would indicate you're stopped?
Yeah, there you can't see it here, but let's see. Right here, you can see this little white dot. That actually is a light. It usually is like green if it's operating in autonomous mode, and it's red if it's not. So I don't know why it showed up as off right here. It could have been that the operator inside had shut us down momentarily, or he was rebooting things.
But I mean, other vehicles being on that same road would not see you?
Yeah, from behind.
With the brake lights?
With the lights, there are some lights here. Yeah, and they're just not on right now. But yeah, I mean, I do have an image I can show you at night, what it looked like. There are some lights, and I'm trying to remember, there has to be some reflective red in the back too, right, Keon? We'll look at the video I got coming up. We'll see if we can capture that, but good question, yeah. This is just to give you a feel for, you know, some of our work zone barrel obstruction tests. We had it in various parts of the lane. We wanted to try to figure out how far away does the barrel need to be before it doesn't impact the speed of the shuttle going by, and it was around 5 to 6 feet. If that barrel was about 2.2 feet off of the wheel path, it definitely stopped the shuttle. Here we just kind of creep by, so it was probably placed a little bit more than 2.2 feet away from the side of the shuttle. But that was just one of the barrel tests that we did. When I was in the middle lane, this was pretty consistent, you know, 5.7 to 6 feet was kind of that distance from where the shuttle actually stopped to where the barrel was. And that was some of the testing we did before we actually got into some pedestrian testing. So here's a night shot. We want to see, does night impact some of the work zone barrel tests? So you can see that green light flashing now. So it's in autonomous mode. You got the headlights. Let's see if we can see the rear of it. Yeah. So we didn't see any difference, daytime versus nighttime operations. And then we did a lot with bus-car interaction. And we had the car in front, following, passing, going up opposing directions. We did all kinds of different things, meeting at intersections. This is a little clip here of the car in front of the shuttle bus. We were following it. It basically came to a stop, and we just wanted to see, well, did we come to a complete stop? And then we took some measurements of that as well. No issues. I mean, the interaction worked great, you know, with the car and the shuttle. Oop, I didn't want to do that. So again, I think it was similar to what we were finding with the work zone barrel for the stop distances. And then here's an interesting clip. And watch closely to see if you can see exhaust. So right now, Mike Kronzer's actually with the video recorder there in the nearby car. They pass us, and then all of a sudden we started slowing down for some reason, and we couldn't figure out why. The car was far enough away, but you can see the exhaust. So what was actually happening was the exhaust was being picked up as an obstruction. And it was because of the way the wind was blowing the exhaust, it was coming right into the detection. And that caught us by surprise. It was something that we learned with it. So, and this was one of those very cold days too, so you had a lot of exhaust coming out of the pipes just from that steam.
Unlike Arizona would have.
Yeah, exactly. Yes?
How do you charge this and how far will it go on a charge?
Yeah, for the battery charging, I do have some charts, but basically if you're in the warm weather climates, they can get about 14 hours off of a battery charge. We were probably getting about half of that, about 7 hours.
That's with heat?
That was using the heater too, yeah. Yeah.
Loaded or unloaded?
So the heaters are harder than air conditioning related to the battery discharge.
And how do you charge it? Is there like a coupling on the roof? Or do you have to plug it in?
There's in one of the corners down like bumper area, there's actually where you could put the plug. I don't think I have a good image of that, but
It's in the back.
yeah. So on those really cold days where we were doing testing and we saw that it was dropping too much, we would take a break and go charge it for a little bit. So we knew we could get through the whole day. Other days we didn't have to do any recharging if we had milder weather. But I would say once we got beyond 6 or 7 hours without recharging, we probably want to be bringing it back into the garage to charge. And they had a level 1 charger, which is the slower charger. So basically we would charge it overnight. So there's 3 levels of charging. We were talking about this at dinner. Level 2 is maybe you can get a recharge in 6 hours. Level 3 you can get that's a high speed charger in about 30 minutes. So we just had the level 1. We just mostly had to recharge overnight. And then this is we wanted to just block a whole lane. This is night testing. And we had done a lot of testing prior to this, so we knew it was going to be pretty safe. And it kind of pulling off to the side because, again, that was its program path. It was actually pulling off to that start-stop point. That's why you saw that little shift there. And then this was kind of the testing once we knew things were really safe. We started at the lower speed, but, how does it interact with a pedestrian? So this is Mike Kronzer, our brave MnDOT project manager. And one thing when we did the measurements, we noticed if we started at the higher speed and it was even the pavement conditions were a little bit slicker, it seemed to increase that stopping distance. So it got a little bit more cautious, which was good to see. And then we had a day where we actually had bare pavement out there. So Ben took his bike out one day and we did a lot of similar tests that we did with the vehicle. Actually, very similar interaction that we saw with the vehicle with the bike. So we tested all kinds of different things with Ben. And this one shows him actually crossing the street. So we wanted to again, do the stop and do the measurement, and it was pretty consistent with what we were seeing with the pedestrian works umbrella. Yes?
Parked cars and somebody steps out between them and you're about ready to cross between them.
Could you repeat that?
If you had parked cars close together, if somebody steps out between them right in front of the bus, how quickly does it happen?
Immediately. As soon as that ped or that person is picked up, it's going to stop. Yeah, if the person's far enough away, it'll slow down. If it's too close, it's going to come to a complete stop, and that's where you can have that instantaneous stop of the shuttle bus. So
people will be flying around inside.
Yes, and I know when we did demonstrations, we wanted everybody sitting down for that reason, in case we had an immediate stop that occurred. Yes.
Are these buses being built just for testing at this point? Are they any use in a practical use at this point?
Yeah, Easy Mile, the company we worked with, they actually have 2 of these buses in operation in Arlington, Texas. They're using them at sporting venues, taking people from parking lots to the Dallas Cowboy games or Texas Ranger games. So they actually are using them that way. There's other competitors of Easy Mile that have them in operation in downtown Detroit, and actually recently set them up in Columbus, Ohio as well. And they are operating them in mixed traffic.
Would it be practical to, at this point, to use it by the Viking Stadium?
Yeah, if we could get the appropriate path set up. Right now, we would not be able to take an Easy Mile shuttle and put it into mixed traffic without a federal exemption. So we'd have to get an exemption. But if we were able to set up a controlled path where there's no other traffic on that path or pedestrians on that path, yeah, there's no reason why we couldn't do it.
These are all using light for measure for the distance and so forth?
Yeah, for the detection.
Why aren't they using radar?
That's one of the things Easy Mile is looking at, is integrating other sensors like radar and the cameras. And that's really going to have to be a solution that they look at in order to combat the winter weather environment, because the LiDAR just doesn't perform well in the snow.
Oh, sure.
So,
Sandstorm?
how are we doing on time, Paul? Because I could conclude at any time. So
Yeah, we're a little after 8 o'clock, so if you have a conclusion, then you can open it up to just general questions.
All right. I'm going to go to maybe the next steps. This is kind of the last slide. So we just started talking about there, Easy Mile learned a lot when they were here in Minnesota. They were continuing to do software enhancements. The bus actually performed a lot better from when they first got here, because they saw how it was operating in snow. They did some software enhancements and they improved the performance just through software. They do recognize they need to integrate other sensors into it, and they're starting right now with the camera. I don't know what their timeline is for the radar. Some other companies are integrating the various types of sensor technology to give better performance. So if one goes weak, the other kicks in, right? And then you kind of have that redundancy built in. We would have liked to have seen more winter weather testing. I think the weather didn't cooperate with us when we had kind of concluded. But I think MnDOT has interest in taking the truck up to Min Road and doing all weather testing with that. So I think the winter weather testing will continue. The other thing we'd like to see here in Minnesota is actually getting it out on a public roadway and seeing how can we integrate with the signals and stop signs and pedestrians and things like that. So I think that's the next step for Minnesota. We want to continue exposing it to the public because we want to get the acceptance, the technology, get people used to it, and asking the legislature, telling them about the importance of this and what it can do for Minnesota. MnDOT's looking at continued partnerships. I know Keon, WSB and AECOM are always thinking about some partnerships and how we can help MnDOT kind of with the next step. And we still have that, full-size bus, a 40-foot bus we'd like to test here in Minnesota. We're not sure if that's going to happen or not, but I think that was an interest from the commissioner and deputy commissioner as well when we started the project. One great thing that's happening in Minnesota, in March of this year, there was a governor's executive order issued that basically formed a connected and automated vehicle advisory council. That council's been at work the last several months putting together an executive report that will be going to the governor's office any day now. There's probably going to be a press release that happens, so keep your ears open for that. They're basically trying to set some direction and kind of the policy that Minnesota should establish related to connected and automated vehicles. So it could include changes to law. It could maybe some thoughts on funding or maybe some infrastructure improvements and things like that. So it's not going away. So it's kind of exciting times, really. I'm going to conclude there, and we can do kind of Q&A then. Okay. There's a question here.
I think somebody said something about it was used at the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
How did that go?
Yeah, I do have some slides.
Let me. The video we made MnDOT.
Oh. It's a 1:30 video.
Yeah, it goes really fast.
So this will give you a feel for what we did.
You know, the era of automated and connected vehicles isn't way off in the future. It's actually happening right now.
88 buttons that had on the vehicle.
The state of Minnesota is really excited about this autonomous shuttle project. We have not seen a vehicle being tested in this type of harsh climate before. Learning things about the weather and the cold, what it does to the batteries, and learning what blowing snow and ice conditions really do to the vehicles when they're in autonomous mode is, we think, probably one of the first tests around the world where we're really taking a good hard look at those harsh conditions.
This is going to be huge on so many levels. The whole goal for people with disabilities is being able to live, work, and play in the community of their choice. People will be able to just get up one morning and decide where they want to go and go. Just do it.
I thought that it was a very smooth ride. It was nice. You look at it, it's running smooth. It's good.
Overall, we've seen a lot of enthusiasm about the technology coming. This is kind of the preliminary phases to get the public involved and get our stakeholders engaged and really move this technology forward here in Minnesota.
Yeah, so some of those clips were actually from Nicollet Mall. So we shut off from 3rd Street to 4th Street to traffic. We also put pedestrian barricades curb to curb just to keep the peds out of there. And we ran it the weekend prior to the Super Bowl. We had about 1,300 people that actually rode it over a 3-day period. So a lot of support. People are asking why isn't it operating on Nicollet Mall right now. So people seem to be pretty excited. And we had all ages out there. So that was great to see. Any other questions? Yes, right here.
Have you looked at how weight affects the operation of these vehicles because of the application of the same technology within trucks and larger buses?
Yeah, we didn't. I'm trying to remember. It was like 2 tons or something, the weight of the shuttle itself. But we didn't get into any testing with looking at weight differentials or anything like that. So, yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the LiDAR technology itself?
The LiDAR technology? Yeah, I mean, I'm no expert on it, but basically it's similar to radar. Radar uses the radio frequency, so the LiDAR uses light. So it's sending out the beams of light, and then it's measuring the amount of time it takes to reflect back. So if it's reflecting off of an object, they can determine that distance based on the time it takes to come back. But the LiDAR was very good for the localization and for detecting things. But it had, like, we were saying, it really has challenges with the winter weather and the snow and blowing snow.
A follow-up to that. So your LiDAR, is it a narrow focus scanning system or is it a diffuse wide angle system?
Yeah, I know they had the different layers that they had. So, and I know there's even different types of LiDAR detection based on what EasyMile was using, but they had theirs, like the 16 layer was right in the front, so it kind of created a cone, like this. The stuff on the top was, I think 180 degrees, but it shot out a farther distance, was looking for those monuments or trees or buildings. And then the stuff down at the bottom was just a single layer, just a little beam that was being shot out, just looking for any obstructions that might be coming close to the shuttle. Yes?
I think for when you have a cloudy situation or smoke or dust or whatever, I think the military, there's certain wavelengths that they know they can see through without, even if you have a huge smoke in front of you. And when I was at Mayo, I was contacted. I work with the Department of Defense. I didn't work, but they asked me about the specific wavelengths if they can get this thing to work through smog. So the technology is available.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
We just need to.
It's a matter of getting the right technology and then the right redundancy, integrated all together.
It's doable.
Yeah.
It's known
Yeah.
by the military.
It is, and I've talked to other vendors, and they seem a lot more comfortable operating in the snow environments, but they're using other detection too. So, yes.
You mentioned autonomous, and then you say connected. How are you using the word connected?
Connected is more where a vehicle is actually talking to another vehicle or sharing information with another vehicle, or talking or sharing information with the infrastructure. It could be a traffic signal controller.
That's what I was wondering.
So that's kind of connected.
I was wondering if you're talking to traffic signaling, because we had a person here a year or two ago who was talking about the advancements they're making, so that we in our cars know where the ambulance is coming from.
Yeah, 5G.
Yeah.
5G.
Yeah, so it could be 5G, and then for the safety applications, the feds are pushing the dedicated short-range communications, which I think will work maybe at a higher speed, and that would be for more traffic signal safety applications.
Didn't use any of that at this point.
No, it didn't. And I think Easy Mile is starting to test out the dedicated short-range communications and kind of that vehicle to infrastructure piece and integrating with traffic signals, but they weren't ready when they were here.
Are you using other vehicles, other manufacturers who use other technology, or are you going to speak with the same company?
No, I think, MnDOT's open to any vendor who wants to come in and do some testing in Minnesota. It's a matter of establishing a partnership. MnDOT has established a program they call CAV Challenge, C-A-V Challenge. Every 2 months they're accepting proposals from the industry. If you have a great idea and maybe want MnDOT to provide some seed money for it, they're taking proposals. It could be any idea, and it could be another company coming in with something else, a little different technology. So.
And if I may add quickly, one other thing is this technology is moving so fast. So everything we're showing was, February of 2018?
Yeah.
In 10 months, they've probably made a lot of improvements. And really, when I think about Easy Mile applying for this and coming after this, at the time they did it, it was a very bold move.
But we still waiting for 5G technology that will connect all these. This is not, we don't have the infrastructure yet.
No.
But it's coming in the next, I think, 5 years or so.
Let's hope so, yeah.
Then all this car will be communicating. Even if you drive the latest Toyota right now, they have the white signal on the road. If the car veered a little bit across, you get the signal tell you no right away. So this is technology. It's just coming very fast.
It is.
It is coming.
It's like, it seems like daily it's changing, yes.
But 5G is the base technology that we have to establish before all these things start showing up. It's beautiful.
Okay, please join me in thanking our speakers tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, excellent presentation.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, there was a lot of stuff. But yeah, it seemed like they were engaged. I'm curious.
Yes.
I'm going to grab my thumb drive.
I just had a question about more general on the roads. Automation.
Choose that one. I didn't want to. Maybe it's cheaper. I have no idea what the deal is, but it's certainly that radar can see through the clouds or through the sandstorm. In Arizona, they have sandstorms.